Political disagreements in this country are at least as old as presidential elections. What made the last one so unusual and even pivotal was the victory of Donald Trump, at first over candidates from the Republican mainstream and then over Hillary Clinton. Even more interesting than Trump were the voters who made it happen, including the people of Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. You can find their stories in the book called The Forgotten. Our guest is the author, who was a reporter and editor with the Boston Globe for 23 years. We'd like to welcome Ben Bradlee Jr. Thank you very much for being with us, Ben.
Hi, Chris. Pleasure.
What is it about this county? Because these are not incorrigible deplorables. They have an interesting history.
They do. I was, like most of the country, stunned that a candidate as unusual as Trump could get elected president of the United States. This was a guy who seemed to insult his way to the nomination sometimes. And he said and did some of the most unusual things that would have destroyed any other candidacy. So I was looking for a different way to write about this, and combing the vote of Pennsylvania, which along with Michigan and Wisconsin, as you know, were the critical swing states that decided the election. I discovered a county in this northeast Pennsylvania, Luzerne, which was traditionally Democratic, hadn't voted for a Republican since 1988. Obama carried it twice, but it surged in the other direction for Trump. And he built up such a margin in this one county that it was 60% of his vote in Pennsylvania, of his victory margin. So without that county, he wouldn't have won Pennsylvania, or perhaps the presidency, to the extent that Pennsylvania's demographics are similar to Michigan and Wisconsin's. So I went down there less than a month after the election and began interviewing Trump voters with a view to using the county as a prism, as a window into the Trump vote.
Well, Boston's a city that has some problems, but generally we feel that we came out from the Great Recession here, and we're not doing that badly. But what about Luzerne County? What was it like down there?
Well, Boston is more part of the global economy. This country feels, this county, I should say, feels left behind in many ways. It was years ago dependent on the coal industry. Coal died, manufacturing replaced that, but a lot of the manufacturing plants have closed or moved overseas. So it's fraying at the edges down there. People are largely out of work and feel forgotten, and Trump called them the forgotten people, his constituency at large, and people latched on to that because they didn't feel heard. They felt Trump listened to them, whereas Hillary overlooked them and ignored them.
One of them was a neighborhood activist who tries very hard to keep her house in good shape. She's got a business, and everything around her seems to be falling to pieces.
She's out. I think you're referring to Donna Kowalczyk, one of my characters. I profiled a dozen people in depth, which hopefully writ large tells a lot of the story of the Trump vote. And this woman, yeah, she's clawing back her street block by block. And she's lived there for more than 20 years, I think, and it's going downhill. You've got prostitutes and drug dealers, and she goes out to shoo them away, but they come back. And she thought Trump might bring some hope back to Luzerne County.
Another interesting character was Ed Harry, former Democratic Party activist, labor organizer, and this guy, he came out for Trump, and in a very dramatic way, too.
Yeah. Well, his union, of course, endorsed Hillary, and he decided that Trump was speaking to him more than Hillary Clinton was. For him, issues like NAFTA and GATT were important, and he didn't like the Democrats' positions on those issues, and he liked Trump. So he announced that he was going to vote for Trump, and his union fired him.
And of course, in the aftermath of the election here, he says, well, he's kind of satisfied with Trump, especially around these trade deals he's trying to remake.
Yes, yeah. Trump is making trade a centerpiece of his presidency, and for this fellow Ed Harry and the whole America First doctrine, if you will, appeals to him. And they think, a lot of the Trump voters, that we should be paying much more attention to our own problems than problems overseas.
Another interesting character is one of the politicians here. He's a member of Congress now, and he's running for senator?
Lou Barletta.
Yes. Tell us about him.
He's the congressman, the local congressman in the area, a very interesting guy. He was the former mayor of Hazleton, which is a smaller city. Wilkes-Barre is the county seat. Hazleton is the second city. And Barletta was the former mayor of Hazleton, who rose to prominence on an anti-immigration platform, anti-illegal immigration. He was Trump before Trump came along. And illegal immigration morphing into curbing immigration was Trump's main issue. So these guys were kindred spirits, and he was one of the first congressmen to come out for Trump, and Trump made him co-chairman of his Pennsylvania campaign.
Now, one of the things I also found a bit puzzling in a way is that Barletta was, he was the guy who tried to crack down on unauthorized immigrants because of all these crime problems that were happening. And after, some of this went through, the population of immigrants increased. And then he said that wasn't really so bad either.
You mean he's trying to have it both ways?
Yeah. He's saying, I'm not prejudiced. As long as they're legal, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Well, he tries to make a distinction. He thinks the press sort of misreported, mischaracterized his stance that he's against all immigration. He says, no, it's just illegal. But I found that the voters in this county really didn't make much of a distinction. They were used to, and that's where Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," resonated. A lot of people have questioned what the "again" means. Wasn't the country always great? Well, again seemed to be a nostalgic, hearkening back to a whiter yesteryear. And I think a lot of these people remember how it was at sort of an Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver time. And now you look around and it's much browner, a little blacker, and they don't feel as comfortable. The demographic change has made them uneasy. And I think Trump sensed that and exploited it.
Well, what I also see here is that Trump maybe picked up on that people aren't really thinking about policy and practice. They are thinking about the culture, the sort of the atmosphere. Isn't that what you found here too?
Yeah, I think that cultural issues are more important ultimately than policy issues for voters. I think in order to vote for someone for president or for any political office, really, you have to like the candidate. You have to feel like you can relate to him. And if you do, you can disagree with him on a variety of issues, but still pull the lever for him. And I think while Trump's voters feel he's delivered on many of his campaign promises, like a tax cut, like getting conservative Supreme Court justices and more, there are other economic metrics which he's not delivered on, like promising to eliminate the deficit in his first 8 years. Well, his budget in 2018 adds $7 trillion to the deficit. And he promised to replace Obamacare. That hasn't happened.
And some people were unhappy with that too.
Yeah, but they forgive him these things because they just like him. They like the way he sits up and raises hell every day, tweets and raises hell.
And there's one person, but he didn't talk down to them.
Right. I mean, I think that was critical. They felt Hillary did talk down to them. Trump made them feel good about themselves, whereas Hillary made them feel ashamed.
I want to ask you how you felt working out there, because there was one comment by one of these voters you reported, and she said, "You people in the media, you don't get it. You don't understand how apple pie this country really is." What did you feel when you heard that?
Well, she's probably right. You know, let's face it, the mainstream media largely missed the Trump phenomenon, didn't see it coming. Probably because a lot of us are too stuck in our big city bubbles, be it New York, Washington, Los Angeles, or even Boston. It's a big country out there. It's a center-right country. And as we were talking earlier, you know, if you look at a map of the country by county, it's a sea of red with only blue pockets on either side. And I think Trump understood America better than Hillary Clinton did.
What about the media landscape? Where did most of the people you talk to get their news?
Well, it's balkanized. You know, people don't have, people serve as their own editors these days. They tend to go to websites, listen to radio stations, watch television stations that agree with them philosophically. They're less into objective facts, partly because we've gotten so polarized in this country, we can't even agree on what a fact is. Think about it. The Washington Post, which has this fact-checking ongoing column, is documented as of September more than 5,000 false or misleading statements by Trump. And that's 8 a day, which is staggering when you think about it. But when these errors are pointed out, his base doesn't believe it. They think it's just the liberal Washington Post or liberal bias pointing this out. So I think that's problematic. But these voters, they go to the Drudge Report, they go to Fox News as their main anchor, Breitbart, and that's how the country seems to be. The left has MSNBC, NPR perhaps, New York Times, Washington Post. We're balkanized. We live in, they're media silos.
I have to admit, you compare this to maybe when you were just starting with the Globe. You know, for people in Boston, the Globe and the Herald, they were the main portals to all kinds of news, even national and world news. And I mean, talk about how different it is from that.
Well, I really worry about the future of newspapers in this country. You know, the internet has severely damaged them. You know, we're dealing now with 2 generations of people who have grown up with the notion that news should be free. And when newspapers try to put up websites, they're meeting stiff resistance. People don't want to pay for their news. They're content with news aggregated sites that just rip off headlines. People don't seem to want to read in depth. I worry about that, and I think that, you know, before long, newspapers may all be going online, and print as we know it today will be dead.
Well, you still got the book, much alive. You're going to be in Boston talking about it pretty soon, I think.
I'm going to be at the Boston Public Library, Rab Hall, Lecture Hall, October 30th.